Singapore's retail market held steady in the first quarter, maintaining an island-wide vacancy rate of 6.3% despite softening central rents. Alan Chong of Savills and Dr. Chua Yang Liang of JLL are here to explain this. What's driving the structural divergence between suburban malls and central locations? Is it permanent? What are your thoughts, Alan?
Well, this thing has been happening for quite a few years and exacerbated by the COVID outbreak when the suburban malls flourished because of this stay-at-home, work-from-home work practice. And the suburban malls then became a gathering point for locals, heartlanders, whereas for Orchard Road, it suffered after COVID because of the slow return of tourism or tourists. And now we are seeing more tourists arrive. So other than tourists, increasingly we are seeing the Gen Alphas and the Gen Zs heading down to Orchard Road, right? And the suburban malls are still a haunt for heartlanders and increasingly the retirees and the elders.
I agree with what Alan has observed, and I think this structural divergence actually has been occurring for a long time, and this is part of the urban planners' long-term plan, right? They wanted each regional centre to be self-sufficient, to cater to retail, employment, and recreational needs of the local residents, thereby reducing the congestion in the downtown. But today, that plan is not really in play, and we have the central area focusing primarily on tourists, local, and working population in the daytime. For the suburban retail, as I mentioned, is largely the local resident catchment. During a strong economic growth period like the 19th and the 20 and the 2000s, of course, this structural divergence is less observable, and we have tourists arriving, supporting the retail scene. But today, I think things are a little different, as Alan mentioned, post-COVID, right? And alongside urbanizing Asia, this structural divergence has become more starking. And the cause to me is basically retail leakage. As a financial and wealth hub, Singapore's strong dollar has naturally led to Singaporeans spending more overseas and conversely less from our foreign counterparts. So in a lot of these, our retail sales have definitely softened. Well-managed malls, however, continue to outperform, while equally the retail ones tend to face some challenges.
The Fringe area rental index just hit a record low. What's behind that decline?
When we talk about the Fringe area, you need to understand that it's about geographical differences in here. Here, the difference is largely due to the nature of the retail assets in this locality. The Fringe area is a sandwich class in that sense. It includes Bishan and Toa Payoh as one of the residential area, but it's a more day population here and possibly a more diverse collection of independent retail shophouses as compared to the managed and retail malls in the regional centers in the rest of the central region. So as such, the index reflects the challenges that these small retailers to the underlying economic and consumer trends we are seeing and facing here in Singapore.
Well, the Fringe area is quite diverse. Some parts of the Fringe are ensconced within upper middle income estates like Marine Parade, and then the other parts of it are in the older parts of Singapore, embedded within the first few batches of HDB or public flats. So we see that the aging population may lead to some parts of the Fringe located malls seeing the effects of lower consumption power because they are being fed by the aging population, whereas the upper middle income areas are still doing well. It depends on which mall in the Fringe area had leases that had more leases expiring in a particular quarter. And because of this effect, you may see the fact that in the quarter one, the rental index fell. It could rebound again in the second quarter because there are other malls who in better locations and better well traffic and better consumption spend in those areas that see the retail space being renewed at higher rents.
With vacancy holding below 7% despite closures, how healthy is Singapore retail actually?
In general, I think the retail scene is healthy given these macro numbers of 7% of vacancy rates. Now, of course, within the 7% vacancy rates, there are groups that are being not doing well, because retail these days is pretty finicky. At one point in time, this concept is a sure win, and you give it a year down the road, the crowd peters out, thins out. So retail today, I think you've got to keep moving and running in order to keep it relevant. So I think the leases are like for 2 years or 3 years, 3 years, say. And but within the lease topography, I guess that there are concepts that are super hot, and then there are concepts that are slowly fading from hot to lukewarm, and there are retail F&B concepts that are no longer in vogue. And then that needs to be returned and repositioned again in terms of for the landlord. I guess overall it's still there. It's still all right. You're going to get lots of complaints because the ones that are fading off makes the most noise.
Certainly, I agree with Alan's observation. I think the headline numbers suggest that they're still quite resilient in that sense. But we know very well that the retail scene in Singapore is highly fragmented. Very strong, resilient suburban malls tend to outperform, especially those with better managed mall operators as compared to, say, in the central and fringe area, especially because of the diversity of the assets here. They are more fragmented and more independent, so they do face the challenges of the larger economic and consumer trends. Right? Alan mentioned, I think the crux really is how are these retailers, be it managed assets or unmanaged or single entities, how are you capturing the moving trends as consumers move, as consumers' tastes change? How are you capturing that? Of course, the whole experiential retail that's so critical today in any malls, in any independent retailers, is how you bring that all in together. It's important.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts, Alan and Yang Liang.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, those were Alan Chong, Executive Director for Research and Consultancy at Savills, and Dr. Yang Liang Chua, Head of Research and Advisory for Southeast Asia at JLL. For more news, visit realestateasia.com.